Welcome to another Saturday episode of Countdown to His Coming. Hey, thanks for joining me today. So glad that you are a part of what God is doing here in this place. Trying to get everything together here for our episode. Listen, it's been a great day already. I'm recording in the afternoon because this morning started with a men's breakfast up at Mud Creek Baptist Church in Hendersonville, North Carolina, where I had a chance to speak to a great group of guys just having breakfast, praying with one another, supporting one another, having great fellowship, and looking forward to everything God's going to be doing with them in the future. Then secondly, went straight from there to the congregation Beth Shiloh in Tryon, North Carolina, one of our churches that was celebrating something fantastic. You see, when you go to one of Beth Shiloh's campuses all over the world, you're not just worshiping with them, you're worshiping with some people from other places as they connect via video and audio with some of the other campuses, and they share in the worship experience together. Today, there was a brand new congregation celebrating together, and that new congregation was in the country of South Sudan, Africa. That's right. An African congregation, the second as a part of the Beth Shiloh family. And what an enthusiastic group of people in this, the youngest nation on planet Earth. It just became its own country in 2011. And what's amazing about this country is they are quite poor. They're trying to get on their feet. A lot of opportunities to go up because, they were pretty far down, especially because of all the persecution they had been receiving from the Muslim North before they were able to break away as a country. And this particular nation is unique because of its current population. About 60% claim to be Christians. Well, we met with some of those this morning, and it was an enthusiastic group that partook in the worship together with not only our American congregations, but looking at some in some other places. We were, of course, meeting about 10 o'clock in the morning, which is 4 o'clock in Sudan, same day. And it's interesting to see how Beth Shiloh connects these congregations worshiping together in messianic worship across the different time zones. What a wonderful event that was this morning. But as we come to this Saturday, I know many of you have been asking, what did you think about the events of this week? Well, first of all, here we are the day after a tremendous rocket attack, yet another one coming from Hezbollah upon Israel. The war that has continued unabated, just in forms that people want to say, well, it's not a real war if the real armies haven't invaded and come across the borders. Well, they did on October 7th, but hey, it's not a real war. I beg to differ, because if I was sitting right here in Chesney, South Carolina, and we were having rockets thrown at us, drones, other attacks, the specter of terrorism being held over our heads every single day, I would think we were at war. Well, that's what's been going on with Israel. And after 1,000 missile barrage yesterday, Israel responded by attacking and taking out 7 key Hezbollah leaders. We're still just kind of waiting to see what Iran is going to do, as it has promised an attack on Israel. It seems to be waiting for something to see how that's going to work, but they haven't let up as their proxies continue to attack Israel over and over again. And here we are getting almost around to a full year after October 7th, and there are still hostages being held in Gaza, Americans among them. What a terrible situation going on there. But guess what? It's exactly what God said will be taking place in the last days. Go check out Zechariah and you'll see at least part of what we're talking about. But then when you get to America, all eyes seem to be on Chicago last week for the Democratic National Convention. Oh, what an event it was. I should perhaps more say it was a circus, because it was all about performance. Everyone knew that Princess Kamala was going to be coronated, even though she did not participate in a single primary election, didn't receive a single vote. And back when she attempted to run for president in 2020, she never earned a single delegate before she had to back out. Yet this is the new nominee for the Democratic Party. At the same time, you have to recognize that someone who wanted to run against Biden, and we're talking about Robert Kennedy Jr., wasn't even allowed to participate. His own party basically torpedoed his attempts to run for president. And guess what? Yesterday he said, enough of this censorship, of this political strong arm tactics. I'm going to withdraw from the race, but I'm going to give my support to Donald Trump. Wow, so lots of things happened last week, politically at least. But to me, the most devastating things were going on in Chicago, and thinking about Chicago itself as an example of what will happen if the Democratic Party gets its way to convert the rest of our nation into this kind of a city. Then, friends, we're in trouble. Now, what did take place? Well, the convention seemed to be all about one person, and that person's probably not Harris or Walz or any of the rest of the folks that are part of the party, because the name mentioned most often each and every day at the Democratic National Convention was Donald Trump. You see, it seems to be a party that has caught itself up in basically a two-point platform. The first point is hate Donald Trump, hate Donald Trump, hate Donald Trump. In her acceptance speech, Harris didn't even mention the word inflation, which is most on our minds, but she did mention Donald Trump numerous times. On the very first day of the convention, his name was mentioned some 147 times. Really? Well, it seems like the first thing they want you to do is get in your mind that Donald Trump must be some kind of evil demon, and that you must hate him, hate him, hate him, even though when he was in the White House, our nation had prosperity. The Abraham Accords of peace was going all over the Middle East. We were having jobs and jobs and more jobs. And right up until the pandemic hit, America was setting records for where it was going with a brand new healthy economy. This is the guy you're supposed to hate. He's going to do terrible things to you if he gets reelected. We at least know what he did the first time. So first and foremost, there's the platform of hate Donald Trump. But the second part of the platform that they have made, the key pivot point is the word abortion. Now, they try to cover that up by talking about women's health care and right to your own body. That is, unless you're an unborn woman. Listen, it's all about you being able to take the life of your child when you want to. It's your decision. And so making this a key part of the platform is kind of what set us up for what shouldn't have been a surprise at all, something that looked more like a religious festival built around the new sacrament of this religion, which is abortion, and or, in good woke fashion, sterilizing the next generation of our kids so they won't be able to reproduce. And how is this happening? Well, even this week, Planned Parenthood complied by bringing a mobile bus so that you could, from a place where you had to have an appointment, but the appointments were, as of the first couple of days, were all filled with people who either wanted to come in and have a free vasectomy or wanted to come in and get that medical abortion. Yes, that's part of for the first time in history, part of a political convention in the United States. This kind of sacrificing human beings on the altar of pagan politics has never been seen in America today. As I heard one particular lady on the radio yesterday say, you know, an entire classroom of future human beings that might have contributed greatly to our society will not get to be born because of the activities that took place this week in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention. It even included parades, people dressed up as abortion pills. Can you believe that? A giant IUD statue. Now, you can't make this stuff up, folks. It looked like a gigantic worship festival to the god Molech. Now, why would I mention Molech? Well, because in the scripture, Molech is the pagan god that demanded the sacrifice of children. And if you wanted the blessing of Molech, You wanted Molech to somehow, bring the blessings to your army that was fighting off invaders or invading some other place, or you wanted blessings on your crops or anything else, then you had to pitch in. What do you pitch in? Your own offspring. Because what Molech demanded was the sacrifice of your children. God has some strong opinions about that. In Leviticus chapter 20, you'll find a lot of those in the Old Testament. But in particular, I think it's most telling that God not only did not want you to sacrifice your children to Molech, but if you did it, he would demand your life. It was a capital offense. Now, as we get to, I'm going to start with Leviticus chapter 18 this morning. In verse 21, here's what God said. You are not to sacrifice any of your children in the fire to Molech. Do not profane the name of the Lord your God. I am the Lord. And if someone did, then what would happen? Well, here's what God said about that. The Lord spoke to Moses in Leviticus chapter 20. Say to the Israelites, any Israelite or alien residing in Israel who gives any of his children to Molech must be put to death. The people of the country are to stone him. And I will turn against that man and cut him off from his people because he gave his offspring to Molech, defiling my sanctuary and profaning my holy name. So God has some strong opinions about people who would kill their own children. It seems like this is now the brand new point of worship. You're supposed to brag about it. You're supposed to lift up people who have done it. And you're supposed to make sure that everybody has a right to do that. And not only must you have a right to kill your own children, but of course to let your children be indoctrinated into the idea that they might just be the wrong gender. And so that they must be put through things like puberty blockers and maybe even surgeries that will sterilize them forever. Instead of realizing that children sometimes do have fantasies and misconceptions and thoughts that they will, with the proper guidance, grow out of and be normal human beings who accept who they are and how God made them. Instead of saying, oh my goodness, we've got to create in you a whim, and that's what modern sex education is doing to our children, create in them some ideas that are just fantasy, they're not reality, and then allowing them to act on that with the encouragement of an entire industry that knows they can bank millions of dollars in the process. Well, this all took place in the city of Chicago. I wondered why Democrats picked Chicago for their convention this year. One of the richest politicians in the country, of course, is the governor of Illinois, who was glad to host there and speak. But if you think about what has happened to Chicago, it's been under Democrat control for about as long as anyone can remember, you're looking at a city that, number one, moved their entire school calendar back a week just so the kids could come participate in the convention. That's right, they want them to be a part, see it firsthand, try to get them started on the indoctrination program into being loving Democratic children. But I want you to think about what's been happening with the school system in Chicago. Talked about this a little bit with our men this morning. Even though spending is up since 2012, some 97%, in other words, there's plenty of funding to go around for Chicago schools, the report card on what's happening isn't so pretty. In the last year for which there was a full report, 40% is the chronic absentee rate in Chicago schools. Only 1 in 4 students can read at their grade level. 82.5% are not proficient in math, and we could go on and on. It's a dismal picture of how badly Chicago schools are educating their kids, but they're doing really great in one area. What is that? Sex education. Because they start early. They start in kindergarten. They start indoctrinating their kids by first grade in gender identity. By the 5th grade, they understand what puberty blockers are all about. By the time they're in junior high, they're being exposed to a plethora of wonderful books that are all designed by the LGBTQ plus community to describe in terrible details things that you and I would consider pornographic, things that if you tried to put these pictures and some of the pages up even on your channel, you would have to block it out because these are things you can't talk about and words you can't say, not legally at least, or not without being censored on the internet even in some places. Listen, it's amazing that this is the kind of indoctrination that's going on in the public schools, and Chicago is all for it. Their libraries are full of these kind of books. And one particular group called Parents Defending Education, as they began to look at this process, said that here's what's happening. What's happening is that every single year, the kids are being pushed a little more and a little more toward hardcore queer theory. Some teachers are still rather uncomfortable even talking about this. They're like, I'm sorry, I can't do this with our kids. So guess what? The city of Chicago has lots of money to spend on not teachers that are certified to teach, but some, quote, health educators. Yeah, health educators, not certified teachers, who come in and deliver the poison directly to the kids. And we'll talk about all these sexual issues. Is it any wonder that some of these kids are coming out confused, messed up, and ready to take off, not just doing some things that you would have considered dangerous for them at a young age, but now it's the fad. We're supposed to get in line with all of this, with what being the objective. What are these kids going to be like by the time they get into the later years of high school and into college and they become adults on our streets? It's anybody's guess, my friends. But what we do see is something that looks perilously like the return of the ancient gods, this time to America in full force, teaching all the things that God said were dangerous and should be discarded in ancient times, yet they're being pushed upon us now as the platforms of a political party. Friends, you and I have got to recognize there's a very real spiritual battle going on in our country today. It should be a battle with very plain lines drawn so that you and I can recognize right from wrong. But I'm amazed at the folks who are out there trying to blur those lines. A media that is completely complicit in turning the United States of America into just one more little cog in the wheel of the beast's worldwide empire. We shouldn't be surprised. The Bible told us there would be something like this in the last days. That beast is wrapping its tentacles around the whole world exactly as Daniel first prophesied and later confirmed by John on the Isle of Patmos. It's what we're seeing around us, but the question remains, can we, as a nation, kick against that, be a refuge and a source of freedom even in the days in which the world will be drawn into slavery by these demonic forces? I think only if we are able to actually show up at the polls and vote a true Christian conscience and make sure that it's a free and fair election where the numbers actually add up. Well, friends, the jury's out on all that for now, but we shall see. I want to encourage you to pray for our country during this season. There's never been a more difficult time in our history where we had the choice between absolute leftist Marxism that will destroy our nation and the truth allowing at least some freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, and freedom for the gospel until Jesus comes. Which are you praying for? Hey, I'll see you Monday as we wake up in the Word each and every weekday. And hey, don't forget to go to church, worship with God's people somewhere this weekend. If you're anywhere near Hendersonville, North Carolina, I invite you to come join us at the Mud Creek Baptist Church this Sunday at 10:30. But in the meantime, you keep looking up because, my friends, the King is coming. God bless you.